Okay, this is becoming a little tradition with us. We put all of our speakers on a big panel at the end and let you guys in the audience have at 'em. So if you got, no, you're stuck now. I don't know if you guys have any comments that you want to make first before we throw it open to questions.
Does everybody know who we are? We do a different session.
Well, that's a good point. You want to start at the end and introduce yourselves?
Sure, I'll start. Jennifer Fawcett, Scaled Agile Framework Fellow.
I'm Mark Lyons from Calgary, co-creator of DAT.
Hi, I'm Byron Hatwood. I'm a technology fellow at Just Eat. I live here in Vancouver.
Hi, I'm Adrian Moise, running Equilibrium, a product delivery company based in Vancouver.
I'm cheesy, and I'm just a piece of cheese.
I'm Artita Karai. I was on the What's My MVP?
I'm James Shore. I co-created the Agile Fluency model with Diana Larson. I'm probably best known for my book, The Art of Agile Development.
Thank you, everybody.
I wanted to start with, sorry we didn't give you much time to question, so that's why. Any questions now?
Okay, so open for questions. Here we go.
So, my question actually comes from another question that was asked this morning. So the question actually was me. Here we go. So the question I asked was, how many business people are at this conference right now? I think one person put their hand up. Poor sod, he must have been feeling so conspicuous he ran off to the washroom and we've never seen him again. But he came back. So that's
There he is.
As a changed person.
Well done, well done. So that says to me, Houston, we have a problem.
Yeah, exactly. That was my question.
So any transfer, I think it was Steve, Stephen said,
Could be.
his experience in big enterprises, when he gets in there, things still look as though they're 1990s. That is reality. I've worked for a lot of big companies all over the world, financial institutions, and that is reality. Right? No one's thinking like that in those big institutions. So we're a room full of geeks talking about geeky stuff, hurrah. But how is that actually helping us change the attitude and the mindset of the people who control the money, generally the people in leadership, for actually changing Agile from being just a technology-led initiative, which Philip, he went through the list, the chronology of all of the different things. The unfortunate reality is we don't want Agile to be branded just like SDLC and all the other things that came along, but we run the risk of that in the eyes of the business, because where are they? We haven't changed their experience, so we haven't changed their belief, and we're just sort of tinkering around the edges. So the question to the panel is, how do we influence our business partners? Probably without them we're nothing.
Yeah, I think that partnership has to exist. And I think the next step for Agile is to go from Agile development to an Agile organization and agility in general. So we see organizations who are actually embracing Agile thinking across all other disciplines. So running the marketing teams, the Salesforce team, using concepts of Kanban, for example, or human resources. So to truly succeed, you need to get this from the basement, a bunch of geeks using a computer, to take this to the executive team. So for example, in our company, we run the executive strategy workstations using Agile projects that are being tracked in Jira Agile. So creating that kind of walking the walk, and we're seeing in big organizations, I give some example from GE and Microsoft, how they move from startups and entrepreneurs to intrapreneurs, and building that concept even in large enterprise organizations.
Well, another thing, usually the Agile transformations majority starts from a CIO or a CTO that comes and sees that his organization is continuously busy and the business is not happy. So the new magic word is, okay, let's go Agile, because Agile is going to solve all our problems. So usually Agile transformation starts from IT because of IT organization that is not delivering what business wants. And all of a sudden we get these people from business that we bring them in the team. Oh, we have now an Agile team, we're going to do this project in Agile, and you are the product owner. And I've had teams where the product owner came to me and said, what does that mean? What does it mean? I'm not the product owner, I have an AVP. I report to a director, right? I'm not, I'm just my previous name used to be business project manager. So we are not taking the right approach on bringing business slowly into this buying of this Agile. We are going to business with, oh, we're going to do Agile and it's going to be better for you, trust us. I found that it helps a lot when you start educating product owners at the same time when you educate the teams on what Agile is. And when all of them understand their role and what to expect from each other and what to ask to each other, things get better. At the beginning, there is that trust that doesn't exist there, but the more you work closer together, when a product owner works closer with the team, that trust starts building and they start trusting each other. The other problem is that business usually, they are in operation mode, and they're saying, well, I don't have time to be constantly on the room with the team. So for them, it's also a disruption on Agile. So sometimes they don't like it because for them works well. Here it is, this is what I need, go now. I'm dealing with the operations, right? I don't have time for you. So that is another problem that we need to deal with to make this product owner to understand. So not just product owner, but the business. To understand that now we need them closer and we need to bring them in that daily stand-ups and demos and backlog grooming and all of that concept that we teach our teams. So usually we should not start just IT, we should bring business as well.
Yeah, I'm going to play off of that a little bit. So we've done a really great job in training our teams and getting Scrum up and going and Agile and all the practices around that, but we really haven't done a good job in sharing the knowledge across the organization, across the management, across the leaders. So if you look at it from well, I taught my teams Chinese, but we didn't train the leaders Chinese, it's really not fair. So let's give the leaders of our organization, the program people, the knowledge that they need. Let's spend the time in training and get them to understand what the principles and best practices are and get them to apply it so they can actually learn together with the program. So that said, I like to play off the, train the product owner. All the roles need training. Everybody needs to understand their new role in the enterprise and where they play in the enterprise. How everybody organizes around value and how if we are to get value out the door, everybody kind of needs to play their role. And all roles are important in order to get it out the door. So, we have a coy little saying, and that is train everybody, launch programs, and learn. And that's the best way we can get people and enterprises aligned. And I like to see, I've seen a couple patterns. I've seen very successful ones where the CEO or the CTO says, yeah, we're doing it, we're going. And that's kind of, top down, and everybody goes, everybody aligns around that. That's pretty easy. But I've also seen a success pattern where you have some internal change agents, some people where it's really hitting home. It's extremely painful for them to get stuff out the door. It might be a product manager or a PMO type person. And they say, look, let's just try something. Let's just try something. Let's get everybody aligned around it, and let's go. Let's launch a program together and learn from that. And then once they start being successful, it starts to become ubiquitous, and other people want to play. They want to get on board. And then the portfolio says, wow, they're doing something new over here. We may need to adjust our metrics. We might need to adjust how we measure things. We may need to put a new way of program portfolio management in place, and their eyes light up. And they want to be on board as well. So we start to see them come maybe a little later, because in the beginning, they really didn't have anything to measure. They didn't have any Agile programs going, so it's kind of hard for them to do anything unless they have any data. So sometimes that comes a little later.
I want to be
careful about one thing here. If we look at the folks that have attended here, and we have one business person out of, I'm sure, more than 200 people here, it might look incredibly bleak, right? And we might say, God, we have done an absolutely horrible job working with the business. Now, I'm not saying that we haven't, but I think it was the opening keynote this morning that talked about taking one data point or one experience and extrapolating it out to the best, to the broader universe. And I don't think we can take one data point that we have one business person here and say that we've got such a small representation. I've worked in lots of companies where I have seen very engaged business people. I've also worked in lots of environments where I've seen that they're not engaged at all. So I just don't want to paint such a bleak picture. I think a lot of the lack of engagement, we need to blame ourselves. I think we have several decades of teaching the business the wrong things, several decades of building distrust and of making promises even though we know that we're only going to achieve that promise if some miracle happens. And I think part of what we have to do is be honest with the business and say, we've been wrong. We've made lots of mistakes. We've heaven forbid, but we've lied. And we really want to try to work with you to make things better. And we can't do it only on our end. We can only do this if we work with you and have those open and courageous conversations, and then start to build out the trust by actually delivering. And it is a slow path. It doesn't happen overnight. It's taken decades to get into some of these messes that we're in right now, and it will take a while to get out of them. Anyway, that's my idea.
And I also want to add that I don't think it's a big picture at all. In my experience, I've seen some just wildly successful Agile implementations where the business is so engaged. They're not like that by default, but you have to bring them in and teach them what product ownership, like what does that word really mean, right? And I paint a picture. By the way, we have a similar approach to SAFE in that we start with executive training, just so they understand what this is all about, what all the fuss is about, as well as business training and delivery team training. But it's more than the training, right? It's experiential. And it's like two friends told two friends. And what I actually like to do is have the business understand that it's their product and inviting their peers to the demos and demoing the product themselves. I don't think the IT team should be doing the demo, right? To the Scrum Master. It should be the Scrum Master doing the demo to their Vice President and saying, look at this awesome product that we are building, right? So I've seen a tremendous level of excitement between the business and IT, but we do have some repairs to make, right? And we've always injected a level of indirection between IT and business with business analysts and systems analysts. And by the way, I'm not saying we don't need those skills, we absolutely do. But we used to say, don't let the customer talk to the programmers. We wouldn't want that to happen. But when you take that out and allow the business to talk to the teams, you start to build a level of trust. And then, of course, there's accountability. There's the power of commitment from Scrum. There's the transparency into everything that you do. All that helps to build up the business, rebuild that relationship with the business that we seem to have lost. And by the way, I think that this is less of a problem in a product company because they kind of assume that the product managers and owners are going to work with the team. But it's more of a problem in corporate situations, right? So, but we can work with that.
I'll add two things. I think not all businesses need to succeed, so some are better at evolving than others, and I think that's definitely part of the spectrum. And then finally, echoing something I heard earlier, starting small and having something actually really tangible, delivering value in a production environment with money on the line rather than just sort of a framework concept, I think is pretty important. Those things go a long way to getting the rest of the enterprise paying a bit of attention. Executive sponsorship is great, but that's sometimes hard to get. Often they need to be convinced by showing real difference what Agile and DevOps methodologies can actually bring to reality where others don't.
Any final comments before we go on to the next question?
Nothing sells like success.
Profound statement, would you say? You had a question?
I just wanted to say that maybe part of, I want to get like everybody's opinion on that too if possible, that part of it is that like agile teams are self-organized teams, you know. So if you want to breed that culture of self-organization as a leader, you want to be giving up a little of control and facilitate basically the growth of your team. And for some people who are not as open as progressive thinking as leaders in their organization, so they may not be able to, willing to give that up. So that might be.
Do you have a question?
No, is that I want to say if it's something that makes sense or maybe
Absolutely. Large organizations, there's rate of change is different on different levels for different people. The organization itself, sometimes the people themselves need to change for these things to really be unlocked at scale.
We tend to look at leadership and management at scale as more leaders of as developers of people. I mean, that turns to be their role as opposed to leaders of managers of the work. Right? So we need to kind of shift that thought to we're really not building software. Actually, we're building the people that build the software. And that's our job, is to facilitate that, to give them the tools and techniques that they need, and to mentor and coach them through that process.
Here, talk about this morning, use a term that I love, but that we try and make leaders and people think about intrinsic motivation as a really key aspect to make this stuff work in any kind of scale. If the people doing it don't believe it and aren't interested in getting better at it, then you're kicking yourself about how you're going to really be successful or not. It will all fall apart. So that intrinsic motivation leads to a real buy-in, not only at the low level, but ultimately as you go up.
So as we look towards agile at scale or agile for business, which is kind of we're all really interested in taking that to the next level. When we look at the business stakeholders, when you go beyond the team level, you look at program portfolio level, those categories. Are the business stakeholders? Are they the customer? Are they the product owner? Or are they members of the team? That's the
Yes.
question.
Yes, every single one. Every single one has this construct of content authority. And being able to align the business around how we decentralize control and who throughout the system actually has content authority and can provide that governance and guidance works differently throughout the different basically levels of the framework. So for example, big things at the program level, at the portfolio level, the epics, who has content authority over that? Well, people who hold the keys to the car, right? Because they've got to fund the darn thing. And then from a program perspective, who has content authority there? Well, that's a product manager because they're out talking to customers. They've got the vision, they've got the roadmap. They kind of know they should know where we're going from a value stream perspective. And then when it comes to the team, who's got content authority down there? Well, somebody's got to help prioritize that backlog and economically sequence that backlog for best success at the team level, and that's that product owner. And we decentralize that control, and we have that governance and guidance throughout the framework. And that's how we scale. That's how we go fast.
And there's a group we didn't mention. So in DAD, we have roles, right? But we don't have a customer role. We actually have a stakeholder role. Because the Agile Manifesto is very much customer focused, right? It's all about the customer. But that's great. Deliver high value software to the customer. But what about the other stakeholders? Excellent talk about DevOps. What about the people who have to actually run and support the software? Shouldn't we try to delight them as well, not just the people who actually use it? So yeah, it's not just the people you mentioned. It's also people like the DevOps folks, who are ideally part of the team, right? But if they're not part of the team, if you haven't got a DevOps discipline in place yet, you still have to think about release management and support and operations, and make sure that you don't hand them off something that's poor quality, has high technical debt, etc.
David Schmaltz has this term project community, which I find very valuable. And that is everybody who influences or is influenced by project. I prefer to think in terms of products rather than projects, but whoever is influenced or influences by, those are the people that you should be considering when you're thinking about about your actions, who they affect. Some of them are more central than others, but I think it's a useful exercise to write out, to map out who your project is. So that includes ops and other stakeholders as well.
I have a small question about the team structure. So, for example, if we have a team that's working in Agile, everything is fine. We have some newcomer, maybe from university, just graduated. What can team do better to basically to bring the new person in the Agile world and how they work and others? And what, from your point, can the newcomer do to basically to get to this kind of version of Agile to this particular team?
Well, it can accelerate the timeline. So run a one-day iteration, for example, and then that will allow somebody to experience the entire life cycle of an iteration in a very accelerated form. So, because you can read a book, but unless you see this in practice, you won't be able to kind of step on those landmines, get the scars, and actually learn from the mistakes. And it's pretty straightforward. It actually delivers business value for you. You get a one-day worth of stories into your backlog, and you get to experience anywhere from planning to the demo at the end.
I was just going to say, I find there's no replacement for doing the real work, and so you didn't say which role this person is, but I'll make some global statements. I think that pairing on real work is the fastest way to accelerate somebody's learning on what they need to do. If they're a developer, have them pair with other developers, not just one, but have them pair with multiple developers. The same if they're a business analyst or a tester or whatever it might be, because they're just, you learn by doing the real work the real way. You can go to a class and you could be introduced to ideas, but there's not real learning that happens there. It's more the introduction to ideas. It's doing it day in and day out over a period of time that accelerates that. And I find pairing as one of the most effective techniques for that knowledge.
And to build on that, to build on that, a lot of the classic Agile techniques that unfortunately kind of get pushed aside because, I don't know, they're not enterprisey enough, make bringing new people in really a non-event. I see teams that truly have collective ownership, do pairing, have a shared team room, have big visible charts and information radiators. They assimilate like the board. It's really just not an issue at all. If you're not seeing that, if you're having trouble bringing people in, consider that a sign that you're not doing things as well as you could.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. I mean, one of the things that we do to get people in well is to start with the why. So why do we do these things? Why do we have the processes that we have? And actually each team sort of just at least their task with figuring out the right set of agile processes that work for them. So there's no prescriptive mechanism of how they need to work. So each team is tasked with telling their new hires why we work this way, and that is fairly contested. And then really to pair, and that is an important part. You can't just throw people in the deep end. Although we do try and give people a small bit of work that they can do themselves. You see shipped and live, and what that means, because of course it's not just about the functional pieces, but it's the non-functional metrics that we want to also see get built out. And those things go a long way to helping people feel part of that assimilation process, part of the actual team.
How many people here, has anybody read the book Joy, Inc.? Yeah, like show of hands? I really highly recommend it. Yeah, the pairing is definitely a good idea. This is a company that's very successful, a company called Menlo, and I think it's Auburn, Michigan. And they pair exclusively. And they all work in a room like this, about this size, maybe a bit bigger. It's kind of a basement of a warehouse. But imagine like 80 people all, and they do a daily stand-up, by the way, for 80 people, just, you know. But yeah, they pair exclusively. Also, some interesting things. They rotate pairs every week. So you get that knowledge transfer around the entire team. It's not a team of 80 people, like it's a number of sub-teams, right? And the other interesting thing they do is they actually do their interviewing in pairs. So they take two strangers vying for the same job and get them to pair exercise. It's part of the interview process, and then point out the strengths of their paired partner afterwards. So imagine that's interesting dynamics. But pairing is the best way.
Well, on top of that is also the ultimate pairing, the mob programming. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Yes.
Where the whole team works at the same time at the same thing. So it's one big screen and only one keyboard, and only one person is typing at the same time, and everyone is around and everyone is looking at exactly what is going on. It's called mob programming. It's interesting, and it shows the guy that started that, Woody Zully, he says that our people that join the team, the new people that join the team, they come up to speed in very, very quickly, because they get to hear from everyone, they get to learn from everyone, they see what's going on, they get to sit day one on the keyboard and then experience the whole thing. And usually these are the teams that also have like some sort of team agreement. So I think that's where everyone is trying to say. So there is some team agreement where we know as a team how we're going to work, and we have some values as a team. What is our core values? What do we do to keep this team successful?
There's a lot of context around mobbing that hasn't come out that you should be aware of.
Yes.
I'm not going to say it, just go look it up.
Yes. Sounds rather interesting, but rather scary.
It is the most effective way to work as a team outside of doing pairing with an on-site customer, because it puts so much emphasis on having the product manager in the room.
Next question.
Does the panel have any suggestions in terms of approach or tactic to get what I would classify as the leaders of today, and I'm thinking business leaders, who traditionally brought upon that traditional management paradigm, which is quite different than the stuff that we're today, quite the opposite. What's the tactic or an approach whereby you can get permission to talk about Agile and things around that space? From personal experience, a lot of those C-level leaders of today in business, they're totally having different conversations today through their 9-to-5 day in the office. They're not talking about any of this stuff. So how do we get that conversation going? And I'm connecting on the conversations very early this morning where it was about is Agile mainstream or not. And so everybody's kind of heard of it, but I guarantee you everybody's got a different take on what it is, which is probably part of the problem. But tactics or approaches to get the conversation going at the C-suite level.
I can tell you what my approach is. We usually run an executive workshop to have discussions about exactly this, and I take the executive through sort of basically what Agile is, and then also I start to point out some of the structural impediments that they have in place with regards to them being truly Agile as an organization. It's kind of a crafty way for them to admit that they're really, really broken. So I say, you know, and by the way, the nice thing is at our stage in our industry, there's now some real solid numbers and empirical evidence behind some of the really bad things that we do, like task switching, right? 3% of an employee and 25% of a tester and all this other ridiculous stuff. So you can actually show them some evidence that you lose 10 or 20% productivity every time I add another project to what I have to do. It's just pure math, right? So they say, oh, that sounds like a bad practice. Good, got that. How about the cost, the friction that Philippe talked about, the cost of starting a new project? And just when and you have no velocity, by the way, so it hurts your estimating. And just when the team is starting to hum, then the project ends and you disband them and put together another group of strangers and go through all that again. Like, executives aren't dumb, right? They're not dumb people. You just sort of need to remind them about really, frankly, the obvious stuff. How about the inherent risk of super large projects? Do we need to have a $20 million project, or could we maybe break them down into smaller projects? So long-term teams, fully dedicated. I didn't talk about co-location, right? And get them all going sort of, yeah, you're right, you're right. And then what we use a tool is like moving from, moving to. So moving from is the stuff we used to do, big projects versus products, dispersed versus co-located, et cetera, and that now becomes the vision for the transformation. So that, those are our secrets to get them to buy into it, and that drives an action plan for the rest of the stuff.
Can I ask a question that people are asking a question? Like actually, I think Morgan, yeah, just and also you too. I'm wondering. It sounds like for you, example, you're talking. You had like an executive buy-in to have this conversation, right? It sounds like these folks are saying it's when we don't have the executive buy-in, and we're coming from a different level. How do we approach it then? I think is what I'm hearing, and I'd love to hear maybe talk from that perspective because that's where I am. That's kind of where I live, and I like partially that executive buy-in.
Well, I'm going to interject just for a second. On the committee, we've had a couple of attempts to engage people at the C-suite level, business people. If you look at who's attended this, they're almost exclusively from the development side in one form or another. So, I mean, it's a very good point. How do you get them to engage if they aren't actually in the middle of having a transformation process? Like, how do we get them engaged to the point where they want to have a transformation process to Agile?
So it feels like the question is coming from maybe some enterprises that are little late adopters or maybe laggards. And what is it that they need to see the way? And what they actually need is to see somebody else that's done it. So they want to go to Gemba. They want to see somebody else that's done it. And I've actually seen in some of the classes taught, the direct competitors sitting next to each other going, "Oh, you're doing it too? Okay, when are you doing it? Can I come watch you do that? Because I want to see how you do that." And so they need to see the proof. They need to see the case studies. They need to have peers that have done this, and they need to have their own kind of, coalition for change from a laggard perspective or a late adopter perspective, so they can share that information and feel confident that they're making the right decision for their organization.
There's another piece to this, it really depends on where the question is coming from. If you personally would like to work in an Agile organization, go quit your job and go work in an Agile organization, because it is way easier than changing an organization from within. Been there, done that. If you see a problem that Agile would improve, don't talk about Agile. Talk about the problem and how you'd like to improve it. When I finally get in the room with the C-level person, because I'm talking about the problem and I'm credible and I have political capital that I know how to spend wisely, personally, because we've all got our own thing here, I use the Agile Fluency model to talk about costs and benefits. There are different benefits that you can get, and each one of those has a cost, and let's be really straightforward about those costs, because the only thing worse than not doing Agile is promising the world with Agile and then failing, which too many people do. So, actually, not doing Agile is just fine. There's nothing bad about that at all. So, something to think about.
So just basically speaking their language. So if you want to talk about Agile with executive and user stories, you're probably going to lose them pretty quickly. However, if you think about things that are really core to them and that important, think about scalability, think about alignment, think about visibility, then you can speak how agility in general can provide this type of framework. For example, to have them aligned with the other members of the executive team, to be able to understand the risk, to understand how the business can scale or differentiate. And if you use these terms and then position agility as a way to ensure this type of business objective, then you got the attention.
I'm going to come at this from a completely different angle, and might piss some people off, but it won't be the first time. I don't try to convince them. I think it's a futile attempt. I think it's not worthwhile, to be quite honest. And the reason that I say that is because just having an executive that you convince them to allow you to do something is a sure recipe to not be able to do it. I've just seen that way too many times. If you really want to be successful at changing an organization, the person at the top has to be very passionate about it and they have to be willing to expend their political capital to make it successful. So I don't try to convince anybody anymore. If you don't want to do it, that's fine. I have enough people that want to do it who are passionate about it, and that's where I go. So that maybe builds on something that Jim was saying, that if you want to be in an Agile company, go find one. So that's my view.
If you cannot change your company, then change your company. Talk value, and if you are there and you see that those executives are not getting it, what makes me happy is to see some of the people in the team that I coached that get it, and they leave, they go to another place, and they are happier. At least I made one person happy.
And if I hear that you're not getting executive buy-in, that usually tells me that there's no pain in the organization. People are not going to change unless they're motivated to change. They perceive there to be a problem, right? One thing I didn't mention in my previous rant was time to market. I mean, every executive is thinking about time to market, and I think it was Jim was talking earlier about banks and companies like that are scared to death of the Facebooks and the Googles of the world, because we're reducing the regulatory hurdles for stuff. These used to be barriers, right? It's like, I was a bank, I don't have to worry about you because you have the same problems I have. Well, guess what? The startups and the banks are actually figuring out how to get around those processes and move more towards a continuous delivery model. I'll tell you one more thing is that what we're seeing actually is that our experience is that the work that we're getting often is actually not driven by IT. It's driven by the business. And last year, I spoke at the Agile conference on a case study which was Panera Bread. So it's a documented experiential report. This is not private information. And where the story I tell is that the president of Panera Bread went to his CIO and said, I heard about this Agile thing, A, and B, I'm really unhappy. When I want to change my iPad application for the kiosks in the stores, you're telling me it takes 6 weeks minimum to get it done. That's not good enough. And I've heard about this Agile thing. What are you guys doing in that regard? And that's basically spawned a transformation, right? So I'm actually not seeing what you're seeing, which kind of tells me maybe there's a lack of urgency at some level. So we need to remind them.
That's typically where I see major change efforts come from. Historically, in the early days of Agile, Agile was introduced in organizations, grassroots, through individual teams, and you can still do that. And the success of those teams would breed more success and also breed some organizational antibodies, as Alistair Coburn put it, trying to kill the success. More recently, and definitely if you want to see big change, I go where it has already started. And it starts at the top in exactly the way you're describing.
Any more thoughts?
Since we're talking about executives and they love metrics and do horrible things with them sometimes, I was curious just if you guys wanted to share any of maybe the funniest or most horrifyingly abused metrics you've seen in relation to Agile transformation.
The easiest one is comparing velocity and velocity.
And maybe you.
Lines of code per developer.
Single line of code. That's a great one.
Or the number of bugs found. So the vanity metrics, right? We have all heard about those. They don't give any value. They just hurt the teams because they force people to do the wrong behavior. So if you set a metric, think about the behavior. It's called the Cobra effect. I don't know if you know the story. Maybe I'm going to say it quickly. It's a story where they said that there were cobras in Delhi, in India, and the British that was ruling at that time, they said, okay, we're going to give you money for every cobra that you bring to us. And what happened is that the entrepreneurs started farming cobras. So British figured this out and they said, oh, wait a second, we're not here to pay you for farm cobras, right? So they stopped the program, and what happened is that all the farmers let the cobras out on the street. So the situation is even worse than it was at the beginning. So you didn't fix it, you just changed the behavior and you made the situation even worse. So think about every metric you put.
There's a really good book. This isn't a funny story. There's a really good book out there called Measuring and Managing Performance in Organizations by Rob Austin. and I highly recommend it for anybody who's thinking about metrics. And I would agree that velocity is the most abused metric in Agile, and I just want to clarify, because a lot of people don't know this, it's not a productivity metric, it's a prediction tool. And if you're not using it to predict, stop collecting it.
I'll even go a step further. I don't think any of the Agile metrics are useful outside of the team at all. I personally believe that the lean metrics are, if we want to communicate outside of the team, they're the right metrics. Things like cycle time or cycle process efficiency. These measure, they can't be gamed, and it doesn't matter what process you're using, waterfall, Agile, whatever, you can measure consistently across all of your teams.
So, everything can be gamed.
Well, especially when you have people as brilliant as James. So, but metrics, you have to be very careful. If you haven't, take some time to learn about Hawthorne effect and Goodhart's law. They'll enlighten you to the effect of measuring.
Since you're talking about like the Agile metrics, probably it's not the right tool to present to the executive level. So what is the right tool to present to the senior managers? Because, for example, in my company, the situation is we transfer from waterfall to Agile. So those senior guys used to see the project progress chart, all sorts of those things, and all of a sudden they look at the user story. They are passionate. They want to see the, like, say, how many story points we finish every iteration and everything. And those stuff actually sometimes could hurt the team. So we, in the middle, actually, we don't want to give them the. So
I think delivering story points is a red herring. It's meaningless. It doesn't matter at all. What matters is delivering working software. And so that's why I like the lean metrics, you know, and you could take the same measurements from the waterfall teams and the Agile teams. Cycle time is cycle time, no matter what process you're using.
If they're interested in story points, start talking about minimum marketable features, MVPs, or invite them to come to the product demos, or the iteration demos. If you're going to collect something like the lean metrics, which I do like, because everything can be gamed, one technique that's neat is to measure at the peer level. So anonymize and collate by taking the peer team's cycle time and turning it into one collective number. That's a neat trick for reducing some of the gaming that can happen when you can no longer put the metric back to a specific team. Now teams have incentives to work together to improve things rather than to push each other down to make their number look better than everybody else.
You can determine the business value delivered per release, and this is where you can work with the business, with the product owner to assess why are we doing this. So the other thing is, if you have a backlog, it's less important to say I'm doing 50 story points per iteration. But if you have a release based on this, as I said, predictive metrics, you can tell that this release will be done in 10 iterations. And that gives you some predictability in terms of some meaningful metrics, as opposed to let's double the number of the velocity of the team. Okay, we give you estimates that are twice as big, and then nothing changes. We just give you some inflated metrics that have no meaningful value.
Well, now that being said, there are some business KPIs that the business has, right? The trick around those is that the KPIs need to be relative. Because sometimes we are saying, well, we need to be the first ones on the market, and then we have 10 people ahead of us, like 10 competitions, right, ahead of us. So maybe on that case, use the relative one. Let's say, let's be the 6th on the market first. Let's see how we're doing there, and then you can see that all your KPIs and all these business goals are helping the team to move slowly with the MVP mindset. If you set like really big goals and really big KPIs, they're not going to help the team, and the team doesn't know how to measure their progress toward those.
Mark, you've been trying to say
Oh,
something.
sorry.
Just tell them before me. So go ahead.
I was just going to add that we measure our engineering teams. Their metrics are pretty black box. The availability of the services they're responsible for, the rate of release change, and the business metrics that they're trying to move. Those are the things that we measure on white box stuff. We're all for looking under the hood when those particular ones tell us there's something going wrong. But otherwise, it's just actually for their internal use. I absolutely agree that story points, velocity, these are things that actually don't have a lot of value outside of the team itself, and their incremental improvement the following week. The ones that really do tell the macro story are the ones that I mentioned.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed this presentation on DevOps. One of the metrics you showed was the number of releases per year or something like that, frequency of releases, which is a very tangible metric. But it's really interesting because the executives love the metrics, don't they? And when we go in and start talking about transformation, the first thing they want to hear from us is, how are we going to measure it? What are the metrics? Team productivity, all that kind of ROI, all that kind of jazz. And like, you're shipping software once a year right now. Gee, if we could do it once a quarter, would that be a win? So, Scrum talks about shippable software every couple of weeks. Let's just get there before you start wanting to measure and compensate teams by Agile, right? Just bring them back to basics.
Yeah, actually, to sort of bring two questions together. Okay, so I think one of the topics before was around pain. And actually, if you don't have a way to measure that pain and whether it's actually gotten better, then you're not going to be able to say that this particular methodology, whatever it is, has actually been worth the investment. So I think actually trying to find some way to measure that pain. For us, it was around availability and it was around release rate. That's why one of those things, I think they actually have some value in other organizations, but those were our pain points. Having a metric around that pain is absolutely the way to build the trust with that C-level, that actually you were able to deliver what you say you're able to deliver.
Another thing that teams forget to use sometimes is the business value on the stories, right? It's all about, okay, developers and testers do estimation and put the story points on the story, but nobody asks, what is the business value on this? So probably starting with that might be a good start to get thinking behind the value that we are delivering, because it forces the team to work always on the highest value.
I've tried with many companies. I've got it to actually happen once. But this is something to try. You can ask your business liaison to provide an estimate of value at the same time that you provide an estimate of cost. You can do this at the EPIC or MMF level rather than the story level, because stories are hard to do. I did this with one company, and the numbers were so ridiculously positive that they stopped. They were trying to get us to justify increasing the head count. So we did this exercise. The value per person was off the charts. It was just completely off the charts. And they hated doing the exercise, and they never did it again, but that one time was really, really enlightening.
They keep asking you for estimates of cost.
Well, cost estimates can be prediction can be really valuable in some situations, but we don't share those cost estimates or velocity. We just provide the predictions.
There's a guy, Dan Rossthorn, who's written a lot about that. If you want to read someone who's talked a lot about how do you define or measure value and track it in Agile teams, I think he's got 3 or 4 white papers that you can Google for him.
Maybe we'll see if he's interested in coming up next year and talking. One of our speakers.
Well, don't hate me for saying this, but he's a dry speaker. Well, this isn't recorded, is it?
It is. What was the name of it?
I'm not going to say it again because ask me later. I always insert my foot where. No, he's a very smart, brilliant guy. His writing is really good.
Discussion about it rather than a speaker.
I think he spoke for us.
I think he's been up here once.
He's a very smart guy. I like his writing.
Another question on the MVP. So if I'm having a new startup and I have a novel idea, by releasing the MVP, am I at risk of exposing my brilliant idea to the big enterprises?
You are at risk of proving that it really is a brilliant idea.
And I might lose it.
It takes a while, right? That's where the speed is important.
Your biggest problem is convincing people that your idea is interesting.
And they're willing to pay you for that.
Once you've done that, you've proven your market.
Well, you can also have to prove that you can scale to, as opposed to you got lucky with that customer who's going to be your customer.
Scaling is scaling is after, right? Because at the beginning, you're going to do some money, you're going to look at the revenue, and then you're going to start seeing that you're making money. And it comes to a point where the profits and margins, that they're doing well, and that's where you start seeing, do I need to scale now? At the beginning, you're all about proving your hypothesis. Is this something that can work? Is this something that I can quickly add another feature and I can make it available to the customer? And a big enterprise is not going to be as quick on that because they haven't gone through the test that you have done. They have not had the failures that you have had. So it is that mindset that you have had and all the learning that you have done so far with all your MVPs and all your prototyping that the enterprise hasn't done yet. So every failure, everything that you have done has taught you something to move forward faster, better.
You will be so thrilled when your idea is popular enough to be copied. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Do we have any other questions, or shall we wrap it up and anybody who wants to can stick around for a few minutes and talk to the speakers in person? No more questions? All right, I think we've lost enough of our attendees to put a pin